Okay, we're continuing with The Best of the West. This is the movie number 66 about this book. It's The Best of the West in Art, Music, Movies, Music, and Books by me, Pete Rogers. So this guy is Ignaz Semmelweiss. And he was a brilliant obstetrics and gynecology doctor who figured out that when the babies were delivered by the midwives, they would wash their hands between deliveries, and the infection rate was very low. But when the babies were delivered by the doctors, they would go straight from the autopsy lab to taking care of the patients, and they did not wash their hands, and there was a very high infectious rate. People didn't really know bacteria and germs back in those days. And so he said, wash your hands. And it's a long story, but he was a little bit adamant about it, and they got pissed off at him, and it ended up not turning out well for him. He got sent to a mental institution and beat up and killed in the mental institution. So what I'm saying is, so here's a guy who figured out how to dramatically save, hundreds, thousands, millions of women's lives, and the reaction of the medical profession was to fire him, beat the shit out of him, get him killed in a mental institution. So that's how the conventional medicine receives clinical advances. So, you make a BS drug that doesn't even work, and they claim a 5% improvement. It gets celebrated everywhere, put on all the standard protocols, and given to all the stupid pros. But some guy figures out how to dramatically increase survival of maternal delivery, and they screw them over, destroy them. Okay, so that's kind of how conventional medicine goes. That's why I said if you got an IQ over 150, don't be a doctor. Go into research, go into something else, because you'll constantly see how stupid it is, and you'll get in trouble for that. But anyways, there's Ignaz Semmelweiss, okay? Let's see, where was he? He's a Catholic doctor. Anyways, he died at 47 years old. That's his reward for helping the pearls. Okay, here's Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp. And she's from England. She was a nurse, and she went to the Crimean War, and she felt that she had been called by God to become a nurse, okay, to help people. And she really improved things a lot. She lived from 1820 to 1910. It was, let's see, she especially emphasized ventilation of the patient wards, hand washing, keeping track of outcomes to figure out why so many people were dying, improved hygiene in general. She became known as the Lady of the Lamp. She had a bunch of Catholic nuns that were helping her take care of the patients. She established the first nursing training school at St. Thomas Hospital in London. Here's another painting of her, Florence Nightingale. There she is, receiving the wounded English and Irish soldiers at Scutari during the Crimean War. The Crimean War was 1854 to 1856, painting by Jerry Barrett. So anyways, pretty nice. Here is Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp, when she'd be making rounds on the soldiers. This painting's by Henrietta Ray. Okay. And of course it reminds me, Lady of the Lamp, of Lady of the Lake from the Legend of King Arthur. Okay, here is a famous pathologist named Rudolf Virchow, and he's famous for a couple of things. One of them was Virchow's triad, if you got what causes clotting, abnormal blood vessel, abnormal flow. He's known as the father of pathology, painting by Hugo Vogel. Okay, he was a German Protestant Lutheran pathologist there. He developed a systematic way for performing autopsies. He was very anti-Darwin, said that Darwin was a fool. And that's important that you know. By the way, like I said, don't fall for this nonsense about Darwinism being correct. Darwinism has limited utility. It is useful for the concept of microevolution. It is useful for the concept of so-called evolutionary thinking. But it cannot explain origin of life. It has nothing to do with origin of life. And it cannot explain macroevolution, origin of complexity. That's important to know, because all you kids that went to public schools, you think that you know what you're talking about, and you don't. Your education is very pathetic and poor and weak, okay? I majored in evolutionary biology, A+ student in the subject. I've read about 50 books on the subject. And you can look this up on the internet in 5 seconds. Look at the lectures of James Tour, Stephen Meyer, Michael Behe, okay, and many others, and you'll see Dennis Noble, for example, Douglas Axe, for example. Okay. Anyways, here's Louis Pasteur, French Catholic scientist. He was a pioneer in the study of microbial fermentation and developed the technique of pasteurization. He also studied microbiology, developed the concept of germ theory. Okay, here's another guy who did some similar work, Robert Koch, Protestant Lutheran, pioneering German microbiologist, won the Nobel Prize in 1905 for his work on tuberculosis. He also studied cholera. He developed the technique for culturing and isolating a pathogen with bacteria, and those became called Koch's postulates to prove that that particular bacteria is causing a disease. Okay, and then here I have a picture of a monkey, and it's kind of a joke because there was another scientist named Antoine Béchamp, and he developed what is called terrain theory, that what a person should focus on is developing their immune system and keeping themselves healthy, because if it's healthy, he says the infectious bacteria is unlikely to take hold. But he was not popular. He wasn't making money for the corporation, so he got vilified. You can't even find a public domain image of him on the internet. And so that's why I just put a picture of the monkey, because I don't have a picture of him, which I thought was kind of funny. But that's kind of how it goes. If they don't make money off you, or worse, if you cause a loss of money for the corporations, they'll try to get you fired, discredited, have your funding for your research taken away, get you erased from the internet. Okay, that's modern science. That's why when somebody tells me, oh, the Catholic Church was mean to Galileo, I'm like, you have no idea what's happening in science. The real scientists, all of these guys in nutrition, Kempner, Burkitt, McDougall, Esselstyn, Ornish, all of these ones that have done big research, T. Colin Campbell, goes on and on, myself, we're not allowed in the conventional textbooks, never were, never will be. They'll talk about Burkitt for Burkitt's lymphoma. They won't mention his abdominal pressure syndrome, which is a million times more important discovery, okay? Because they don't want the pros knowing about this stuff. They're completely dishonest, these books, okay? And if you don't know that, you need to know that so you have a chance to help yourself, okay? Ayn Rand, if a man makes decisions based on incorrect information, he becomes his own destroyer. Yeah. Okay, next guy is Gregor Mendel. He was an Augustinian monk, Catholic Augustinian monk. He's a genius, and he figured out the patterns of genetic inheritance. He figured out how genes work at a phenotype level. In life, he had local status, but he was otherwise ignored. And then he was sort of rediscovered 30 years after his death, and he became famous at that point. Gregor Mendel, the monk. Okay, here's Maxwell, James Clerk Maxwell. This guy is Scottish descent. He's considered the second greatest physicist who ever lived. Hyper-religious guy. He figured out that electricity, magnetism, and light were all different manifestations of the same thing, of electromagnetic radiation. Okay, and so that's what I mean. You know, guys like Isaac Newton, James Clerk Maxwell, they're super religious. You memorize long parts of the Bible. So all these blowhard atheists, public school educated people say, oh, evolution's real science, okay, and the Bible's stupid and atheism's okay. You don't understand. Real science comes from Christianity. This is proven. Don't take my word for it. Spend some time reading about it. You will freak out when you see that just about everything in science came from the Catholic Church. Yeah, there's a little bit, you know, you got the Arabic numerals. That was a nice thing. There's a few things here and there that came from other cultures, but it's next to nothing. It's like less than 1% of scientific achievement before 1900. It all came from Christianity. Look it up in the book for yourself. You will see that is true. You'll see that other religions, other countries did almost nothing other than Europe and then later United States. That's just a fact. I was rather amazed. I mean, a typical thing is just on the moon, 35 craters named after Jesuit priests. That's a typical thing you find out when you start looking close, just how deep it goes, that's where it came from. And it came from the Christian mindset that man is created in the image of God, therefore we too can be a creator. And because we are created like him and it's a rational universe, we honor him by studying his creation. Versus in other cultures, you'll have all kinds of things like paganism that you can't know, Maya that you can't know, and Hinduism and other cultures too. Islam, that it's an insult to Allah if you say he doesn't have unlimited power. All these other cultures, they've got some cultural philosophy that decreases their initiative to study the natural world. And that's why Christianity developed the scientific method. That's why the Renaissance only happened in Europe. It's just a fact. Okay, well, that's enough for today. I hope you found it helpful.